first chapter in Tactics and Strategy is appropriately called preparation. Preparation is important. Preparation is something that we do before we go to the call. This is where you are prepared for what you're going to deal with when you get there. Now, can we ever be fully prepared? No. There's always going to be those instances that get thrown at us, but we can be adequately prepared with knowing certain predetermined things that we would do in situations. We get that training, okay? When you were a firefighter, you went through your basic skills training. You learned all about what it is to be a firefighter before you ever set foot on your engine. Then once you got assigned to your engine company, you went through on-the-job training. You learned about the specific tools and equipment that your engine company carried. You learned about the different ways that your particular job was done in your particular area. Well, no different when we go out into a new area, when we get assigned to a station, either as an officer or as an acting officer, or even as a firefighter. You have to be prepared. How do you prepare? Well, the call actually begins long before the 911 call is made. The call begins when you're doing your everyday duties. Pre-fire planning, knowing your SOPs and your SOGs, knowing what your company responsibilities are. What are your plans? You know, when we're paramedics, we learn protocols, right? You go to a CHF patient, you have specific protocols that you follow. Well, it's no different with firefighting. Our protocols are written in SOPs and SOGs, guidelines. These are the basic things that you have to do. But that's a guideline. Again, in every CHF patient, you don't treat them all the same way. Some you use CPAP, some you don't. Some you may treat them with medications, some you don't. It all depends on the situation, the individual circumstances. Well, the same thing goes for firefighting. When we arrive on a structure fire, not all structure fires need to be treated the same way. The problem in the fire service is we have gotten a cookie cutter response. We have decided that every fire we have to go to, we do certain things and we go through the steps of doing that. Unfortunately, with today's fire environment, we're learning that these steps aren't always what we need to be doing. For example, we go in and we open the door and force ventilation immediately, without thinking about the compartmentalization of that fire and how oxygen deprived it may be. Then we go in with our hose lines to try to find the seat of the fire and attack it. Well, what we've done is we've introduced fresh air into an oxygen-starved environment. We've given it pretty much what it needs. And now you have high heat, you have high intensity, and shortly after we get in the front door, we have a flashover. Many firefighters have been injured or killed doing that exact thing. We need to avoid becoming structurally confined to certain tactics. We need to start thinking about the fire, preparing for what we are going to do depending on the situation. Being able to read things, okay? There are a lot of tools for us out there. Being able to read the fire ground before we arrive. Being able to understand what the smoke is telling us. What is the fire telling us? What are the conditions telling us before we even try ventilation? Again, putting the hose line on the ground, ventilating, and then maybe waiting. Or trying practices like limited ventilation entry. Limited ventilation entry is a new concept. Most of the time when we open the door, we're going to ventilate in some way or form. We're going to allow fresh air into an environment, especially if it's oxygen deprived, because if it's oxygen deprived and the air becomes very dense, it's becoming contracted, so therefore there's going to be a natural draw to the fire. When we open the door, we create a pathway. That pathway goes directly to that fire. That pathway provides fresh air, it provides oxygen, it provides all the things that the fire may be needing at that particular moment. Well, because it gets that fresh air and that oxygen, the smoke has a chance to become fuel again, which it is, and then that oxygen allows it to ignite. Their heat is present because we already have a superheated environment. So now you have smoke, which is atomized in the air. You have particulates in that smoke. You have oxygen. You have heat. A combustion chain reaction occurs, and you have a flashover. You may even have a smoke explosion. If it's extremely deprived, you may have a backdraft. So all of those conditions can be caused simply by us opening the door and rushing in to go to the seat of the fire. So now the concepts are teaching you to open the door in a limited fashion, make your entry, control the amount of airflow or air current directly to that fire, getting in there, cooling it, then ventilating. Because if you cool it, you lower the heat. By lowering the heat, you lower the propensity for it to reignite or ignite the fuel that's in the air. Now you've given it an opportunity to control the environment before you introduce your air and oxygen to ventilate it out. And again, ventilation is always got to be a coordinated event. When you ventilate through the front door, if you don't have somewhere for all that heat to go, all you're doing is giving the heat oxygen which it needs. And that oxygen then causes a rapid fire event. We'll talk about fire events later on in the course. But again, getting back to preparation. Preparation is extremely important for us. As firefighters, being prepared to go to the fire, being prepared through training, being prepared through pre-fire planning, being prepared to just coming to work prepared. A lot of fire experts will tell you that you prepare for your shift the night before, getting a good night's rest, being prepared mentally to go to work, getting everything off of your mind, family problems, everything else. You need to come to work focused on the job. We have a very dangerous job. You have to be focused on what you're doing when you get to that job so that when that call comes in, your mind can be focused specifically on the call. What type of building am I going to? Have I been there before? What's the likelihood of there being a fire event there? When I get to that fire event, what am I going to need? Am I going to need extra water supply because there might not be adequate hydrants? Am I going to need additional equipment such as aerials? Am I going to need specialized equipment? Is this a large enough building that I may consider going second alarm? What are my reports when I get them from dispatch? Is it a working fire? Do I get calls saying, hey, I've got a number of calls on this, or we have a column when we pull out the station? All of those things are indicating to you what you're going to get when you get there. Those are very important things to be aware of and to be paying attention to. What are you going to get on a first alarm response? Being prepared to know that as well. What am I going to expect to see on a first alarm response at, say, a high school or at a hospital or at a large hotel? All of those things are important. What am I going to get for a first alarm response to a house? Are they the same? Am I going to have to detail my responses based on where I'm going? Maybe I'm going to a very large house. Maybe I know that this is a mansion, and if I'm only getting a single engine response or a single company response, I may have to increase the number of units coming. So again, these are all things that I'm thinking about prior to the incident. Knowing what I'm going to do when that incident comes kind of gives me a little bit of information. In all of my courses, I talk about recognition prime decision making. Recognition prime decision making is essentially putting information in your brain and storing it and recalling it at a later time. Information that you might know about particular calls, information you might know about the size of the building, things like that. All of those are very important for us to have stored in our brains so that when we get that call, we're prepared to deal with it. Again, preparation. That's the theme of the first chapter of this book. We're going to talk a lot about preparation in it.